In this week's Like a Pro tip, we're going to focus on setup. Setting up with a driver and setting up with an iron or woods and irons is a little bit different as far as ball position and the width of stance, but for the most part setup is the same. So I've got a 9-iron in my hands and I'm going to show a proper setup. What I like to do is set the club behind the ball, get my feet right here, just kind of close together, and then separate them just beyond shoulder length. And I want to make sure everything's nice and square to the ball, and I turn this toe out. That helps me pivot that way. And from driver to pitching wedge, so if that's driver, that's pitching wedge or 9-iron right there. It's 4 inches at the most. Ball needs to be somewhat forward in the stance. And I like to lean the shaft forward. Make sure that my chest is on top of the ball and my head's behind it. Belt buckle pointing at the ground. So that's a good setup right there for a 9-iron, and I'm going to grab a 4-iron. So this is a 4-iron, and 4-iron's a little bit different. I'm going to have a little bit wider stance, separate my feet some, move the ball forward. Like I use the emblem of my shirt as a good gauge to where I want the ball to be. So I'm going to get my feet just beyond shoulder length, maybe even a little bit wider. Get my belt buckle pointing it at the ground, and the ball, to me, feels like it's on the emblem of my shirt. And I like to always lean the shaft forward, get my head behind the ball, and that's a pretty good setup right there for a 4-iron. Okay. Next, I'm going to use my 3-wood, and it's going to be pretty much the same as my driver, just a little bit further back off my heel. It won't be as far forward as I would my driver. It's just going to be a little bit ahead of the emblem of my shirt. So I'm going to have my stance just about shoulder length apart. Turn that toe out, make sure I'm nice and square to the ball. I always want to be square to the ball with every club in the bag. But I'm going to get the ball just about 1.5 to 2 inches off my front heel. And then I like to have my hands just slightly behind the ball, like this, and my head behind it. Always trying to keep my head behind the ball, even through impact. And that's how I would set up for my 3-wood right there. And I'll go ahead and hit one and see what happens. I've done better. All right, so now we'll grab a driver and a tee. And driver is the only club that I try to actually hit up on the ball with. I still want to trap it with my chest. I'm sure you've probably heard that before. But all I'm focused on when I'm playing golf is setting up properly. So I've got my driver, I teed the ball up, and I'm going to get a nice wide stance, a little bit more than shoulder length apart. Turn that toe out and make sure everything's nice and square for a straight shot. I want to get my hands behind the ball, and my ball position, if you see, it's pretty much off my front heel right here. So if I drew a line, it's going to be right there, maybe not quite on that heel. Get my belt buckle pointing at the ground and everything's nice and square, and I'm going to hit one. And what I want to do is swing up on the ball to reduce the spin so it'll maximize my distance. Head behind the ball and try to maintain my head behind the ball through impact. That's good. Grab my tee. All right, so that's proper setup in this week's Like a Pro tip.